And I want to thank very much Ed O'Neill and Felice Willett, whose property this is. They have been very gracious to invite us to share their property today. It's gorgeous. They've worked closely with us and have made it a beautiful day. Ed has prepared some historic remarks and some pictures, so I'm going to turn the microphone over to Ed, and I know that you'll all enjoy what he has to say.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Ed, and this is Felice right here. I want to acknowledge Ami and Gail. There's a lot of work that goes into this, and they've been here many times over the last several weeks, and it's a lot of work. And so I hope everybody appreciates what they do for this group. We moved in 2000, so some of you out there have been in the canyon a lot longer than I have. So if anybody has anything they want to jump in and contribute or add, please do that, okay? So I'm going to go chronologically. That the first person who lived on this ranch was Frederick Mazet, who was a Frenchman, lived on the property. The property was bigger than what we've got right now. It included the Bonnell area. And he planted grapes, Bordeaux-style grapes, and he used to sell them here for 25 cents a gallon for the wine he would make from the grapes. And some of the grapes were in this front arena here, and some were probably off in the Bonnell area. And at that time, the old Topanga was not where you see it today, but it passed right, it's interesting we set up here because it passed right through here, the stage, and where you see that rock behind the silver car, if you dug through those bushes, you'd see the remnants of the old bridge is still there on the two sides, where the bridge crossed. If you were coming down the canyon, you'd come here, you'd go right past there and out by Cheese Rock or the Narrows. So he transferred the property to Jack Woods, who was the old stagecoach driver and mail delivery guy, somewhere around the turn of the century. And Jack is the one that built the old stone structure here. And I had the photos set up on easels, but the wind, although it's making it a very pleasant day, it's blowing it around. Let me see if, yeah. So when I'm through, come up and take a closer look at the photos. So now this first one I'm looking at, that's taken from old Topanga, where it is today, looking across the creek. And right here is the stone house, and if that rock is that rock if it's not blocked by the tent. So Jack Wood lived here. He had he took out some grapes and he replanted the field as an apple orchard. Now here's the house right here, and here's old Topanga today, and here's the arena today. And at this point it was originally grapes, and by about 1918, John Bonnell bought the property. And he took out some of the grapes and he planted the apple orchard. And he lived down in the city, and he had a caretaker named Bert Palmieri lived here, and he lived in 2 cabins. And the cabins are up in here, which is that side of the tree in the house. If you walk around, oh, by the way, when we're done, everybody's welcome to walk anywhere you want on the property. There's a vegetable garden back here, and there's a terrace over there. And if you cross the bridge and go through, you'll find a vineyard there, and you can keep hiking. There's a trail all the way to the top of the hill. So John Bonnell had his caretaker live here, and they built a house for him. And this is 1918 to 1933 he sold the property. And he also subdivided off Bonnell Park area, and they sold the lots in the Bonnell Park area. The caretaker, if you look back behind, there's a concrete bunker coming out of the hill. And that was their old cold storage where they'd keep things cold in the summertime and things warm in the wintertime. And there's a couple old, I always thought they were trash incinerators. And there's an interesting story in the Topanga book written by one of the caretaker's girls who used to live up here. And she says it was an outdoor stove. And if you look up by the pool, you can find the old chimney, and they've actually put their initials in it in 1921. You can find that. And there's another one right across the stream over there. You just see the chimney coming up right there. Now, in 1933, Bonnell sold it to a guy named Anthony Heinsbergen, and as a coincidence, I went to school. I knew Anthony Heinsbergen, and I went to school with his granddaughter. And he was a decorative painter, and you've seen much of the work he's done because he did LA City Hall, all the decorative painting. He did Beverly Hills City Hall. He did the Wiltern Theater. And he met Mr. Pantages and wound up doing 750 of the ornate movie theaters around the country. So he lived here until 1946. Now I'm going to go ahead to the 60s and 70s. Joe Gerson and Marvin Zeidler purchased the property in 1966. And I know some of you know both those guys. And they rented the property out to several people, including one had, Sean Rhodes was telling me, they had horses and they took out the apple orchard. And Sean Rhodes lived here from 62. His grandmother used to make apple pies with the apples out of the orchard. And they took the apples out so that they could have horses and horse arena in there. Marvin and Joe also rented it to the Buffalo Springfield band. And I'm going to read you a short paragraph out of Eric Clapton's book on Eric Clapton called Cream. And it takes place in March 20th of 1968. Now, Buffalo Springfield was living here in this house. And they were rehearsing and playing here every night. And in 1968, March 20th, with the night off in LA, before a gig the following evening, Eric Clapton was more than happy to receive an invitation from Buffalo Springfield Band. Clapton was invited to the home to jam with the band as they rehearsed material for their next album. Clapton arrived at the secluded home in the early evening. Nestled far back from the road, the rustic home was all but invisible behind the trees. Although the home was not within eyesight of neighboring homes, it was within earshot. Over the past few nights, the calm of the setting was displaced with an army of fully cranked Marshall amps. Police dispatched a couple of patrol cars to investigate the offending abode at 1180 Old Topanga Canyon Road. It was 10:15 when the officers knocked on the door. An unsuspecting Neil Young opened the door and was pushed aside as officers burst into the smoky haze of the living room. Guitarist Richie Furay remembered the entrance like they were just swarmed on by a SWAT team. Officer Andrew Yobuck recalled in his notes that later served as evidence that the marijuana smoke just rolled out. Stephen Stills made a successful exit through a side window. That would be that window right there. Running at full speed to a nearby friend's home. Neil Young was so distressed by the process that he suffered a severe epileptic fit. Young, Furay, and Clapton spent the night in jail where they were released on $1,250 bail. At a trial date the following month, everyone pleaded guilty to disturbing the peace in return for the dismissal of the drug charges. Okay, that takes it to, in 1973, the property was sold to Dee Dee and Ingrid, or Ingrid's father. And they lived here, and I'm sure a lot of you know them, and I think they hosted a similar event maybe 12 or 13 years ago here.
10 or 11 years ago. I wasn't here, but I heard about it.
Right. and they were very nice people, and they've moved to Texas and since moved back, and I run into them in the store here. So they're very nice people. Now, we bought the property in 2000, and the first thing we did was take out a lot of the non-native stuff. So we took out 26 eucalyptus and pine. There were peacocks and chickens here, and the bobcat took those out for us about 3 weeks. They unfortunately took one of our cats the first month too. So we removed the arundo grass in the creek. Was a lot of work, and we're still removing mustard on the property. We work on that each year, but we're doing well on that. We've planted 60 oak trees all the way from here to Topanga skyline. Yeah, Coast Live oak, and not one has died out of 60, so that's pretty good. 10 sycamore, arroyo willows, and thousands of native plants. So please wander around and take a look and ask questions. Felice knows very well the plants, much better than I do, so she'd be the one to check with. We planted grapes back there, wine grapes, the same variety that was planted here 100 years ago, same varieties. And we bought the property on top, 5 lots, which are part of the Bonnell tract. We bought that in about 2003. So when we're through, if you've not too hot, walk across this way, walk up the hill past the vineyard, and you can walk all the way to the top of the hill. Also, we put in a vegetable garden several years ago, and that's a pretty nice garden, so make sure you don't miss that. And the Matilaha poppies, walk around, take a look. They're pretty spectacular right now. Did anybody, that's more or less what I had prepared, but if anybody has questions or they have a story or something they want to contribute, please let me know.
And how about the native grasses here?
The native grasses, I wish I could tell you a better story on that. We planted native grasses that we get from SNS seed with a wildflower mix, and we were very careful not to use the Roundup. And unfortunately, we've got some pictures. Anyone who would like to see it, this whole lawn was a meadow of wildflowers. It was very spectacular. But over 7 or 8 years, the grass, because it was never really killed, slowly came back and crowded it out. So you'll see some fescue, and if the lawnmower doesn't get it, you'll see an occasional poppy, but it's not as spectacular as it was. So we got a lot of jobs here on this property. So that's something we will work on restoring in the future. But
And you could mention your gardener from the Getty Villa?
oh yeah, well, we've had help from several people on the garden. We had Bob Perry, who was from Theodore Payne. He was chairman of Theodore Payne, and he wrote the book on Western gardening. He came at the beginning when we bought the property, and he identified which trees to take out, and then he helped us with the screening trees and the placement of the sycamore and the oak. And then we had Owen Dell from Santa Barbara, who's a native. He just wrote Native Plants for Dummies, just came out this month, and he wrote that book. And so he worked on us with those plants, and then we've got a guy who helps us with the vegetable garden, and he's from Copia, and we've got a guy helping us with the grapes. So. And Salvador we've got a guy here, he works here full-time. We've got 2 Salvadors working here. One guy works here full-time and takes care of the gardens, and then we have another guy, he comes on Saturdays, and he spends most of his time in the vegetable garden, so he'd be very pleased if all of you went through and looked. And he's from the Getty Museum. And I don't know if you saw, but there was a fire at the Getty 3 weeks ago, and that was one of the guys who works here set that fire, unfortunately. He was doing brush clearance, yeah. And, yeah, with the weed whacker, and he started that fire, yeah. Unfortunate. Edgar. Yes, please. Yes. I can't. I read that in the Messenger too, and I hadn't heard that story before. So I've heard a couple versions of that story, everything from this being Stephen Still's ranch to different things. But that's the most definitive is what I read you. And I've heard that, but I can't define.
I can tell you where that story came from. Michelle Johnson, who is the editor of the second week.
Here.
That story about the breakup of the Buffalo Springfields comes from the new edition of the Topanga story written by Michelle Johnson. And she is a musician and has done a lot of research. So that is what she found out from her research. So I included that in the flyer. So I'm sure it's footnoted somewhere.
I did come across that the band did break up shortly after that, but whether that was the cause or not, I don't know. I'm sorry. I am, and my husband, who have a garden on much smaller scale in this native plant garden, are so impressed with the scope and the taste of this property. When you're here and you look at it, you say, "Oh, isn't this is really, really beautiful and really nice?" But the work, the planning, the knowledge, the attention that goes into it is extraordinary. So I hope that you'll be able to take a walk. Even it's cool enough now, and look around and look at the plantings and know that every piece of everything that has been planted has been thought out and has been very carefully taken care of.